Hey guys, Rajne here. Before we get started, I want to take this time to apologize in advance for any names I mispronounce because I know that will happen. The story I chose to analyze this week is a 130-page French graphic novel called Abelard. It's written by Regis Hautier and illustrated by Reynold. Joe Johnson from NBM translated the text to English, while Ortho was responsible for the lettering. Now, let's start the dissection. Abelard is about a young sparrow named Abelard. After growing up in the peaceful fictional land called Kanavnica, with not a woman in sight, Abelard meets a beautiful girl named Epeli. Determined to win her heart, Abelard seeks to go beyond the flowers and gather a bouquet of stars for her. And to do that, he travels to America, where a machine has been built to make anyone fly like a bird. However, knowing only peace and friendship throughout his sheltered life, Abelard is unprepared for the cruelty and hardship that the world holds. Can he pull through to take hold of his goal? Well, that's something I can't give away, but I will say that Abelard's goal was not forgotten during the length of Act 2. Act 2 and part of Act 3 follows Abelard on his travels to get to America, and he brings up Epeli and the stars regularly. I would say about every other arc, with 2 or 3 of those times having a serious discussion about who Epeli really is and whether Abelard's journey is worth it. That said, Abelard has a very solid story arc, with a clear beginning, middle, and end. The beginning showcases more of Abelard's surroundings more so than Abelard himself. The reader sees peaceful Kanavnica, gets a vague idea of the animals that live there, and, most importantly, figures out what he or she may be in for after realizing that Abelard has never ventured outside of Kanavnica, and that he receives fortune-like advice through his hat. After Abelard hears about a plane having been built and flown in America, he retreats to his tree, where he pulls out another fortune, this one telling that if one wishes to be appreciated, one must either die or travel. On the next page, Abelard writes a note of his absence and leaves, and it is at this moment, page 30, where Act 1 ends. Act 2 then begins on page 31 and follows Abelard on his journey to America. This is when we get to know Abelard on a more personal level through his interaction with characters and the world around him. Abelard also meets Gaston early in his travels, who is a cynical bear who is Abelard's polar opposite in every way. I can't give away too much, but it's during Act 2 when I realized Abelard was not what I expected it to be. The story deals with serious themes such as racism, assault, religion, and bigotry, and not in the sweet, child-friendly manner that many, or at least I, was expecting from looking at the cover and artwork alone. After meeting con artist Anastas and getting scammed into exchanging a gypsy friend's necklace for a spot on the ship to America, Abelard has his first physically violent encounter with a drunken man. I feel that this encounter was the major turning point for both Abelard and the reader, and it's at the end of this brutality on page 94 that marks the end of Act 2, only to be followed by Act 3 on page 95. I don't want to speak in much detail now without giving too much away, but the story does begin winding down from page 95 onwards, and seems to collect all the lessons and encounters up to this point to form a resolution that I personally was not satisfied by. I understood where Hautier was going with the story, and I admit that the themes and events can be quite realistic depending on the person and the location. But I found that the little hope and promise given to the reader at the start of the book was broken by the end of it. For example, many of the little fortunes Abelard received in Act 1 and Act 2 gave a sense of taking control of one's dreams and not settling like others. However, as the story progressed, the fortunes became gloomier with little, if any, sense of encouragement. When a serious theme is discussed, there is typically a moral lesson in there somewhere. However, none was present in Abelard. All the negative and hateful things spoken of was never proven wrong or given an exception. Yes, racism exists, but not everyone is racist. Yes, there are spiteful and self-centered women, but not every woman is like that. And yes, some people have anger issues and use assault when irritated, but not everyone is violent. None of these buts were established nor present by the end of the story, and it's for that reason why I wasn't completely satisfied at the resolution. On the bright side, depending on who you ask, both Abelard and Gaston have solid character arcs that progress with the story. While Gaston goes from a cynical loner to an optimistic teddy bear, no pun intended, Abelard goes from an innocent, sheltered boy to a broken soul not knowing what to believe. Abelard's use of transitions was pretty short, sweet, and to the point, and left no opportunity for the reader to question where or when they were. Every single section of Abelard's story really can be described as arcs, but this is especially seen in Act 2. For example, Abelard meets gypsies during his travels. This gypsy arc lasts for a few pages, but once it ends, there's no spare page of wondering where to go or what to do. It simply jumps right to the next arc. Likewise, the arc speaking of serious themes like racism immediately cuts to what I refer to as the friendship arc right after. Personally, I found this use of transitions made the reading easier and served as convenient rest points whenever I wanted to take a break. However, I was happy that whenever I did read, it was a smooth run because of the page as a mini comic method. For the most part, the story does make use of the page as a mini comic idea. It's mostly used effectively, such as on page 13, where it begins and centers on a hat in the lake, and ends with Slavko asking about Abelard's hat. Likewise, page 26 opens with Abelard looking to the night sky, follows him trying to reach the moon and the stars, and ends with his failure. There are many pages that uses this mini-comic method well, but there are moments when certain ideas aren't accomplished from beginning to end in a single page. But this may be caused by the directional flow. I noticed that Abelard uses directional flow in key moments. When the story wants to pull the reader through to the next mini arc of the story, it does so with concluding conversations and artwork that directs to the right of the page. However, when the story doesn't want the reader to move, it doesn't use directional flow. This is seen during deep discussions or curious exchanges, seemingly a gentle hint for the reader to pay special attention to what's being conveyed on the page. During these relaxed times of discussion, MacLeod's idea of moment-to-moment transition is used. There are many panels that highlight subtle movements or pauses to put more emphasis in the scene or the message behind it, such as on page 14 and page 104. However, the majority of the graphic novel uses the action-to-action method to bring a bit more movement to an otherwise mostly laid-back style of storytelling. Overall, I would recommend this book to my classmates. I feel, as creative students and storytellers, we would all benefit from reading and following this story to not only expand our understanding of storytelling styles and writing methods, but to also be reintroduced to some of the ways of how we can discuss the messages we really want to say to an audience of any age group. Not that I think Abelard is suitable for children, but it's a good reference nonetheless. The only reason I wouldn't recommend this book to my friends is because they're not really interested in this genre or somewhat slow storytelling. However, I would recommend this book for anyone open and able to appreciate any genre and story. Just not young children. I'll conclude this by saying that there weren't really any fun facts I could find related to Abelard or the process of creating it. However, there were little Easter eggs, I shall say, throughout most of the book, with little jokes or ironic phrases that I found to be cute little additions to the reading material. Hope you guys enjoyed.